Alrighty, so welcome to this session, which is entitled the AI No Prep Book Club, Exploring AI in Community. I'm really excited to be with you all today to explore this book club structure that I use at my university. And we're actually going to dive right into an activity. So we're going to do a Menti poll, and you can either click on the link that I'm about to share in the chat, or you can scan the QR code that's on the slide, and it will take you to the Menti poll. And once you're on the Menti poll, you should see a thumbs up icon somewhere on the screen. Go ahead and tap or click on that icon just so I know that you're there. And then once I see that most of us are there, I'll go ahead and transition us to the question. All right, and I'll paste the link again in the chat. And if you need the QR code, it's also here in the bottom left corner of the screen. Alrighty, so here is the question. What is one professional learning program, format, or resource that you've used to help instructors learn about AI? So I'm going to pause and give you a moment to share something that you've used or done or seen maybe that's helped instructors learn about AI. All right, and lots of great ideas are starting to populate the Menti poll. So communities of practice, LinkedIn Learning. I'm seeing a theme of doing some in-person trainings and workshops, bringing in guest speakers for live demos. Some have used books. Someone said, no idea, no worries. Hopefully this will give you some great ideas that you might be able to take back to your own institution. All right, I'm also seeing bringing in research. Let me see if there are any other big themes. Okay, I'm seeing some names of specific books that people are recommending, like The Opposite of Cheating. I have that one on my to-read list. Haven't cracked it open quite yet. Let's see. More LinkedIn Learning, workshops, webinars, YouTube videos. Okay, so many great recommendations here. And you'll be able to get access to all of these Menti poll results. So if you want to take a closer look and see what you might be able to bring into your own context, please feel free to review this afterwards. But so many different ideas. I'm seeing a playground, communities of practice, watching The Matrix. Asynchronous workshops. Okay, so many great ideas. All right, so thank you all so much for sharing. And I wanted to start with this question because I know we're already doing things related to this topic. And my hope is that today's session will just add another possibility of something that you might be able to use at your institution. So with that, our agenda for today just has 4 simple parts. We're going to begin with an overview of the book club structure that I use, the AI No Prep Book Club. And then after that, you'll have some exploration time. Then I'll share some instructor feedback that I received for the AI No Prep Book Club series, and then we'll wrap up with some closing information and resources. And our objectives for today are that you'll be able to explain the structure of the AI No Prep Book Club, describe the benefits of utilizing a book club approach for AI professional learning, and then plan how to implement the strategies learned at your own institution. And so there are a few different ways that you can engage today. One of them is to share your thoughts, questions, reactions, ideas in the chat. So please feel free to use the chat as a space to share throughout today's session. Along with that, we'll be doing a Padlet activity in a little bit. You can feel free to contribute your thoughts to the Padlet, or if you prefer to share in the chat instead, you can do that too. You're also invited to reflect on your own. So if you just want to use this more as a time to just kind of listen and process independently, that is totally fine. And I also invite you to take care of your own needs as needed. So if you need to stand or stretch or step away for a bit, whatever is needed to make this session work for you, please feel free to do that. And I will briefly introduce myself. So greetings, my name is Tolulope, and I've been working in the field of education for a little over 20 years now in lots of different contexts. Currently, I'm an educational developer. My formal title is Instructional Learning Spaces Coordinator at California State University, Long Beach, where I design and facilitate professional learning programs for instructors about teaching and technology. Before that, I worked at Apple as a senior professional learning specialist, and in this role, I was partnering with educators nationwide to help them explore how they could use technology to enhance teaching and learning. Before that, I was a teacher education professor, so working with the next generation of teachers to help them learn all about the profession. And before that, I was a teacher myself. I taught fifth and sixth grade here in Los Angeles. And so I'm really excited to be with you all today. And a fun fact about me is that I just came out with a book about designing and facilitating workshops a little bit less than 2 weeks ago. So that's something that's kind of occupying my brain right now, is just seeing what people are taking away from that book and resource. All right, so now that you have a little bit of context in terms of who I am, I'm going to go ahead and transition to the actual book club structure. And this part's going to be in the form of a mini lecture. I usually don't talk a ton in sessions, but today it's going to be a little bit more talk heavy, but I do want to make sure that you have the opportunity to share your thoughts and ideas and reactions too. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a link to a Padlet board in the chat. And this will be a space where, as I'm sharing what the book club structure is all about, you can post your thoughts, questions, and reactions there. So I'm just going to briefly show you what the TQE Padlet board looks like. It's just like this. There are 3 columns: thoughts, questions, and epiphanies. And you can add a thought to a specific column by clicking on the plus sign below that column. You can type a subject. You can type your thought, question, or epiphany below, and then click on the publish button in the top right corner of the screen, and that will officially add your posts to the board. So at any time that I am reviewing the structure, you can feel free to add your thoughts, questions, and epiphanies there. And if you're like me and it would be hard to listen and be writing on the board at the same time, don't worry, you can just listen for now. I will also give you time at the end to be able to post your thoughts, questions, and epiphanies on the board too. So with that, I'm going to dive in and start off just by giving a little bit of the research framework that I drew on in designing this book club series. And there are 3 different frameworks that I drew on. One framework is self-determination theory, and I'm not going to get into the weeds of this theory right now, but the gist of it is that humans have basic psychological needs, which include the need for competence, so the need to feel like you can do something well, the need for autonomy, so the ability to make choices about what you do, and then also the need for relatedness, so the need to feel connected to others. And so in designing this AI No Prep Book Club series, I was really trying to think about how could I help instructors build competence with different AI tools? How could I give them choice in what they were doing? And then how could I foster a space where we could engage in discussions and connect with each other, especially as we were all trying to navigate this terrain for the first time? Another framework that I drew upon is universal design for learning, and this is all about minimizing barriers to learning that exist in the learning environment. And so there were lots of different principles of UDL that I drew on, but I'll just give a few examples from the first principle, designing multiple means of engagement. So one of them is optimize relevance, value, and authenticity. So I tried to do that by, once again, giving instructors choice in what they do and making sure that they could focus on topics that were most relevant to them. Another guideline that I drew on is foster belonging and community, and this was mostly through our ongoing discussions that we had in this series, and then promote individual and collective reflection. So you'll see in a bit how I actually embedded the reflective aspect into the series. And then the last framework that I drew on is the New Learning Compact. This is a framework for high quality professional learning in higher ed. And there are 16 different principles. I'm not going to talk about all of them for now, but a few that I drew on were, one of them is called protect participant time. And you'll find out more about how I tried to do that in a bit. And then another principle is create supportive professional community. So once again, trying to make this a space where people could explore and try out ideas and be honest about how they were feeling throughout the session. So how exactly was this structured? What was the purpose? So the main purpose of the AI No Prep Book Club series was to experiment with artificial intelligence and engage in discussions with others about possible ways to integrate it into teaching and learning. So just to give a little bit of context, I launched this during the spring 2024 semester. At that time, our university was where probably a lot of other universities were, trying to figure out, okay, what do we do? How do we help instructors navigate this new terrain? And I knew that as an educational developer, I was feeling overwhelmed with how much information I was being bombarded with about AI. And I had a feeling that instructors might be feeling the same way too. And so my thought was, okay, how can I create a space where we can all, once again, support each other as we're trying to navigate this new terrain and figure out what this AI business is all about? And so when I was designing the AI No Prep Book Club series, I wanted to make sure that, first of all, people of all experience levels are welcome. And so I told instructors that whether you have never opened any of these tools or you've been experimenting quite a bit, you are welcome to join this series. I want this to be a space where we can all learn from each other. And that leads into our second principle of we are co-learners. So I didn't try to frame this as I'm an expert in AI and I'm going to teach you all the things. No, it was more like, okay, we're all trying to figure this out. How can we figure this out together? And how can our discussions help us to grow in our understanding of this topic? And so the book that we read is called ChatGPT Assignments to Use in Your Classroom Today. And feel free to drop a yes or a no in the chat if you are familiar with this book. If you've seen it or if you've read it, put a yes in the chat. If this is your first time hearing about it, put a no in the chat. Okay, so it looks like it might be about 50-50 in terms of people who have heard about this. So this is an open educational resource. It's a free book available online, and it was developed by Kevin Yee and colleagues at the University of Central Florida. And they've actually published 2 additional books since then. So this book was published in 2023. They have another book that was called AI Hacks for Educators that was published in 2024. And this year they published a 3rd book called Coach for the Approach. So this is a whole series that they've been doing about this. And you'll get links to all of these books at the very end. So if you would like to explore them further, you can. And one of the things that appealed to me about this book is that, once again, it's an OER, so I didn't have to worry about cost in implementing this AI No Prep Book Club series. And it also includes dozens of practical ideas for how you might include AI in your design of a course or in your student assignments and things like that. I knew that some of the ideas would resonate with people while others may not. And so I felt like this could really lead to more nuanced discussions about the benefits or drawbacks or implications of AI tools. And so in the book, Yee and his colleagues share 61 different assignment ideas for how people might integrate AI into teaching and learning. And these 61 assignments are organized into 7 categories. And those categories are prompt engineering, search, evaluate, analyze, writing, generate, and study. And each of the assignments is written up in a simple 2-page format, similar to what's shown here on the screen. So they give a little bit of background in terms of why you might, decide to implement this type of assignment in your course. But then it also includes sample prompts. So instructors could simply copy and paste these, or maybe use these as inspiration for their own prompts to see what they could do with this specific assignment. So that's a little bit about the book. And this is how we actually structure this. So as I mentioned, I implemented this during the spring 2024 semester, and it was a 6-part series that took place completely virtually. So we're meeting via Zoom for this AI No Prep Book Club, and each meeting lasted about 1 hour. And so the first meeting on February 6th was a kickoff meeting, and I'll provide a little bit more information about that in a moment. And then on February 20th, we focused on the first 2 sections of the book, prompt engineering and search. On March 5th, we focused on the next 2 sections of the book, evaluate and analyze. On March 19th, we focused on the writing section, which is a big chunk of the book. So that was the only topic that we focused on then. And then April 9th, we focused on the last 2 topics, which were generate and study. And then on April 23rd, we actually had an author visit. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment too. And in order to make sure that more people could participate in this AI No Prep Book Club series, I did 2 sessions on each day. So on February 6th, I had an AM session and a PM session. On February 20th, AM and PM and so on, with the exception of the author visit on the 23rd. And so for that session, I basically sent out a poll and was like, okay, let's see if we can find some common times that would work between the 2 groups. And that's when everyone joined for the author visit. So the AI No Prep Book Club series was also designed to be a no prep, no pressure type of experience, because I know that instructors are busy and I didn't want them to feel like, if they couldn't commit to everything, they shouldn't come. So what exactly do I mean by that? First of all, instructors did not need to do any reading or work in advance. That's right. So they would come to the session and all the work would happen there. They didn't have to worry about reading anything in advance or anything like that. And you'll find out more about how that piece was structured momentarily. And then the other thing is that while I definitely hoped that instructors would be able to attend all 6 sessions in the series, I knew that things might come up. And so I told them, join as many sessions as you can. If you can only come for 1, that is completely fine. You are welcome. If you can come for all 6, that's great. But I didn't want this to feel like if they couldn't attend to everything, that they shouldn't come at all. And then the last piece is that I did tell instructors that the workshop, or the sessions rather, would not be recorded. I typically do record all of my professional learning programs, but once again, I wanted this to be a space where we could have open and honest dialogue about, what we were kind of grappling with AI. All right, so I'm just going to pause there. As a reminder, if any thoughts, questions, or epiphanies are coming to mind, you can add them to the Padlet board, which I'll paste in the chat. And then we're going to pause after this next piece to review the responses that are there too. Okay, so I want to provide a little bit more detail about what these different sessions in the series entailed, starting off with the kickoff meeting. And our kickoff meeting was in a more traditional workshop format because this was kind of laying the groundwork for the entire series. And so at the very beginning of the workshop, we did a few introductory activities. One was that I shared a Padlet board with instructors and I asked them to introduce themselves on the Padlet board and set an intention for the session. So what is your hope or your goal for participating in this book club series? And I also did a few Menti polls to find out about people's prior knowledge and experiences with these topics. So the first Menti poll asked about instructors' level of experience with ChatGPT. And then the second poll asked about how, if at all, they've used these tools for teaching and learning. And so this is really helpful in just finding out where people were coming from with their AI use. And then during the next part of the kickoff meeting, I wanted to share some key concepts about AI. So just to give a little bit of context, in the book, in Yi's book about ChatGPT, they have an introductory chapter where they talk about, how large language models work and things to be mindful of. But because I knew we didn't have time in this session to read the introduction altogether, I used part of the kickoff meeting to introduce some of those key concepts. And so one way that I did this was through Google's quick draw activity. I had instructors go and do the quick draw activity where basically it tells you to draw something and then it will guess what you're drawing. And that was a good way to represent how AI is trained on lots of data and how it uses those to make predictions. And then I also made sure to talk about the light and the shadows of AI. And this is my way of framing the benefits and the drawbacks. So I talked about things like how it's great for things like brainstorming, but there's also a lot of ethical implications that we want to be mindful of in terms of human labor and environmental impact and things like that. And then the last part of that key concept piece was introducing the AI fluencies that Yi and colleagues write about in the introduction. And so I introduced what those 7 fluencies were, and then we had a brief discussion about instructors' experience with those fluencies. And then the third part of the kickoff meeting was introducing the structure of the book club. And so similar to what I'm doing today, I briefly told them we're going to be reading this book. It's organized like this. And then we also created some group agreements to guide our discussions for the remaining 5 sessions of the series. And then the last part of the kickoff meeting focused on just kind of getting prepared for what was to come. So at the time, our university, I don't believe we had a Copilot license yet. And so we were using ChatGPT, which at the time you did have to sign up for. And so I wanted to make sure that they were prepared to use it in our future sessions. And so I first of all talked to them about some things to be mindful of, like be careful about what you're inputting, knowing that it's going to be training on the data, things like that. I had them sign up for an account if they didn't already have one, and then use some introductory prompts to get them familiar with the landscape. So that was our first kickoff meeting. And then sessions 2 to 5, these are all focused specifically on the book, and we use more of an exploratory and discussion format for this part. And so each of these 5 sessions followed a format that I call the 4 T's. So I really like alliteration, so I tend to use alliteration quite a bit. And so the 4 T's stand for touch base. So during the first 5 minutes of those remaining sessions, we would touch base as a whole group. And so here I would welcome participants to the session. I would let them know these are the chapters or the topics that we're going to be focusing on in the book. And then we also did some sort of warm-up activity related to the topic of the chapters. Then the next part of the session was Tinker Time. And I want to give credit to Anna Haney-Withrow and Heather Olson, who I got the Tinker Time phrase from. They did an FL-IDN webinar, I think the year prior, and I heard that phrase and I was like, ooh, that's perfect. They used it for a different program, but I thought it fit in terms of what I was trying to do here too. So during the Tinker Time portion of the session, I provided instructors with a copy of a Google Doc, and the Google Doc included links to specific assignments from the book. And so they would choose a few assignments that they wanted to explore and try out, and then they would capture all of the responses on the Google Doc. And you'll get to see what that looks like in a moment. So we did that for about 20 minutes. And then the next 30 minutes of the session was really just an open-ended discussion. So looking back at, what you explored during the session, what did you learn through, trying out these prompts in ChatGPT? What are the implications? What are the benefits? What are the drawbacks? Just an open discussion. And then the last 5 minutes was transition. And so here we did a closing reflection activity. I also shared some reminders in terms of how, they might want to use this moving forward. And then I also shared a resource of the week. And this is a really intentional decision because I don't know about you all, but even today, there's so much information coming at us in terms of here's a book, here's a webinar, here's this, here's that. I didn't want this to be yet another space where instructors are going to feel overwhelmed. And so each week I shared only one resource that related to that topic that they could use to go further with their learning of AI. So that's how those sessions 2 to 5 were structured. And then the very last session was an author visit. And so I reached out to Kevin Yee and I was like, hey, would you be willing to hop on a Zoom call so that our instructors could have a conversation with you? And he was totally willing and totally gracious and generous with that. So thank you to Kevin Yee. And so during the first part of the author visit, we did an independent reflection. And so instructors just kind of wrote down what were some key takeaways from the book? What are some questions that you want to ask Kevin moving forward? And then we had some open-ended discussion time with Kevin, which was fantastic. Okay, so I have been talking for a while. We're going to pause now. And I want to give you a chance, if you haven't yet had a chance to do so, to add any thoughts, questions, or epiphanies about what I've just shared on the Padlet board. So I'm going to pause for a minute of silence and you can add your thoughts there and then we'll review the thoughts that are there as a group. Alrighty, let me go ahead and pause that. And we're going to hop over to the Padlet board and see what's there. And you can feel free to keep these thoughts coming. All right, so let me refresh one moment. All right, so thoughts. I like that faculty don't have to read anything beforehand. Yeah, that was a huge, once again, I know how busy we all are, and I didn't want this to feel like yet another thing where they're going to have to carve out some time to do it beforehand. And the short structure of the chapters made this possible, right? Because each assignment is like a page and a half or 2 pages, so it's easy to do within a short period of time. Another thought, co-learners, no recording, no prep, AM and PM sessions. Okay, wonderful. Someone else mentioned that they like the resource of the week, so we can eliminate those tools that are less secure or really just muddy about the landscape without any true value. Yeah, because like I said, there's just so much coming at us, and I didn't want this to feel like they're going to be bombarded with more in these sessions too. All right, Tracy liked the 4T framework. Thanks for that. Okay, some more love for the 4T framework. Awesome. Less stress is nifty. I like how these are designed with a come as you are vibe. Thank you. All right, some questions. I love this open invite for instructors to join and connect. Were there promotional strategies that were more effective in drawing faculty to participate? Great question. So to be honest, I use the same structure that I use for all of my other programs. I didn't do anything super special in terms of marketing this. I think once again, everyone's just been interested in learning more about this. So there's a natural interest in going further. And I think the fact that once again, there was no cost involved, because typically with book clubs, they might have to buy it or the university might have to fund it. The fact that this was OER, I think also helped in, making this more interesting. And I would say the other thing that helped was that first kickoff meeting. There was a lot of energy in that first meeting and a lot of an excitement. And I think that also helped to carry through for the remainder of the sessions. All right, let's see. Did you notice more participation since it wasn't recorded and faculty didn't have to read? How many faculty participated? Great question. So the participation numbers, as you can imagine, as the semester goes on and you get closer to finals and whatnot, yes, there were a few people who dropped off. But I would say for the most part, participation was pretty consistent, which was great. I think at the most, I'm trying to think across the 2 sessions, I think we had about 30 people in each of the AM and PM sessions, and then it would vary in terms of how many people were able to attend from week to week. All right, was it difficult to get faculty to open up and communicate? No. And I think knowing that it wasn't recorded helped. And I think even just my framing of I'm not an expert, you don't need to be an expert, let's just figure this out together. I think that also helped in making a space where people could feel comfortable sharing. And so there were some people that were very much like, yes, like I want to use this for all the things. There are other people who are like, I don't know about this. And I told them, like, it's fine to be wherever you are in this process. So I think that also helped. Let's see, were you able to turn around some of the negative thinkers? So to be honest, that wasn't really my goal. I just wanted them to be able to explore, to express themselves, and hopefully to maybe have a new idea. Because I wanted to, I recognize that there are lots of different reasons why people might decide not to use these tools. I have my own reservations, to be honest, as well. And so I didn't want people to feel like my goal is to try to convince you of something. It's more like, okay, let's explore, and you can come to your own conclusions about what you want to do or what you don't want to do. And there were people who did have shifts of opinion in both directions throughout the session. Okay, I already addressed the question about participation. Let's see. I wonder a lot about how we say that there are significant environmental and labor concerns, but the underlying message is that we need to move forward with AI. Defiant salamander. That's what it says for Padlet here. I am on the same page as you. And I think this is something that I've also just been trying to navigate is, in my role as an educational developer, I do have this expectation of supporting instructors with the initiatives that the university is, promoting in terms of AI. But like I said, I do have my own personal concerns and reservations when it comes to these tools. And so I was really honest with instructors about where I'm at and how I choose to use or not use these tools in my own work. And I think that's important to have these, once again, honest conversations. I don't think it needs to be like we need to convince everybody to do this thing when there are very real concerns as to why people may not want to do that. So I'm with you on that. Let's see. Was your talk discussion done via voice and mic? So the talk portion, we were all just in the Zoom room and they could just unmute or they could share in the chat. So I told them, however you want to share, you're more than welcome to do that. Let's see. When you described independent reading during the session, you'll see what that looks like in a moment. I'm going to share a copy of the Google Doc with you. Did you have many that were worried about cheating? Yeah, there were some people that did bring up conversations about like AI detection tools. And so I did share what I knew at the point in terms of the accuracy of those tools and things to be mindful of, because once again, I didn't want this to negatively impact students who might be second language learners or have other reasons why their work might be detected at a higher rate than others. So we talked about those issues for sure. Okay, and then another question, how would this work with another book? Yeah, so I think this structure could honestly work with anything that's short form. So you could use this with articles, you could use this with journals. I think it could definitely be adapted to other materials as well. Okay, and I'll talk about Tinker Time more in a moment. With not having materials in advance, what inclusive design supports might have been needed or might need to be part of the future design for the future. So one thing I will say is in the kickoff meeting, I did provide access to the book in advance. So if people wanted to look at the chapters, it's not like they couldn't if they didn't want to, but I didn't have the expectation that they had to before the session. Okay, and I think I've addressed more of these other questions. Okay, let me hop over to Epiphanies for now. All right, so this might be a good way to structure an AI community of practice. Awesome. Some love for light and shadows. Good way to get people involved who might be hesitant, like the Tinker Time idea, and some love for Google Quick Draw. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pop back over because there are some great questions about what exactly did the Tinker Time look like and whatnot. So I want to give you a moment to be able to explore that too. Okay, so as I mentioned, for each of the sessions in the middle, so sessions 2 to 5, I created a Google Doc that had links to the activities in the book. And I'm going to show you a sample Google Doc in a moment, which comes from session 4, where the focus was writing. And so writing is the focus of assignments 27 to 44 in the book. And so I'm going to briefly show you what the Google Doc looks like, and then I'll share it in the chat so that you can take a closer look yourself. Okay, so here's an example of one of the Tinker Time Google Docs. I would share the link in the chat with participants, and then they would open up the document and make their own copy of it. And the directions for how to do so are listed here at the top. And then each of the Google Docs had a today's focus section that just reminded them, like, here's the topic we're focusing on. So for this session, it was focused on the writing piece. And then the remainder of the document includes a chart of the specific assignments from that part of the book. So one reason why I did this is when you look at the OER book, it unfortunately doesn't have like a table of contents that takes you directly to those pages. So basically I made custom links that will jump you directly to that specific assignment in the book. So if I click on assignment 27 here, give it a second, it jumps right to assignment 27. So that way they're not having to scroll through the entire book to find exactly what they need. And so basically during the 20 minutes of Tinker Time, they would look at this chart and pick a few assignments that they wanted to read and try out. So let's say I wanted to try assignment 27. I would click this little checkbox. I would click on the link to open up assignment 27. I would read the 2-page description. And the second page, once again, has the prompts, so they could copy and paste these or use them as inspiration to try them out in an AI tool of their choice. And then as they were exploring, they would also capture their reflections on the very last page of the document. So here they could jot down any discoveries, ideas, implications, questions, or anything else that they wanted to be able to reflect on. So they would do that for 20 minutes, once again, exploring a few assignments of their choice, capturing their ideas on the reflection sheet. And that was the basis for the next 30 minutes of talk time where we were discussing what we found and things like that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share this link in the chat so that you can take a closer look at it yourself. And at the top, there is a force copy link that you can click on so that will automatically make a copy if you have Google Drive, or if you prefer to download it in another format, you can go to File, Download Microsoft Word. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 2 minutes to just take a closer look at the document, and then we will come back together after that. That gave you a chance to take a closer look at the Google Doc. And what I wanted to do next is kind of pause for a debrief. And so now that you know about the structure of the AI No Prep Book Club, you've seen what a Tinker Time Google Doc looks like. I have some sentence starters here on the slide that we could use for discussion. And so they are, I like, I wish, I wonder, I would apply, I would adapt. And so I invite you to share a thought about the book club structure in the chat. And then we'll also, during the last 10 minutes, if you have questions and want to unmute, then you're more than welcome to do that too. But let me pause and give you a chance to share a thought or reflection based on what we've talked about so far. All right, Heather Brown loves it. Stephen likes the checklist. Laura likes the structure time to explore and the document to guide them. Ooh, okay, there we go. Guide them in exploring the ideas. Michelle appreciates the formatting of the document. Valerie likes the structure of the Google Doc and that it can be used in the live session, but also asynchronously for people who can't attend the meeting. Maureen likes the casual sharing opportunities. Alyssa wishes that Microsoft's navigation pane would work. uh, so sad. Heather likes the checklist. Chris, time to learn and focus topic. Love the structure time to explore. Okay, Anna, I wonder if any faculty needed technical or other support during the Tinker Time. Great question. So the kickoff meeting, I tried to, preemptively address any things I could there by, once again, making sure everyone had signed up for an account, making sure they had some time to practice using the tool. And then during Tinker Time, I did tell instructors, like, please feel free to unmute or message me if there's anything I can support you with. But for the most part, they were fine. Like, there wasn't a lot of technical support that was needed for that piece. And I think having those sample prompts in the chapters was helpful too, because they could just copy and paste or use that as inspiration for something that they wanted to try out. All right, let's see. Mindy, can you tell us about whether instructors found this as enough time to get what they wanted out of it? Yes. So typically during a session, most instructors tried to explore about 2 to 3 assignments. Some did more, some did less, depending on their interest, depending on what they wanted. And because they had access to the Google Doc after the fact, they could still explore after the session too. And so I will be sharing some concrete feedback from instructors in a moment, but yes, in general, the timing seemed to work just right. All right, some love for the reflection sheet and the bookmark link to the reflection sheet. Okay, and then Michelle, I wonder if the instructors have been sharing your workshop with colleagues. So yes, I did get some feedback that people were going back to their departments and saying, hey, you should come to the thing. I don't know if they shared the workshops, the worksheet specifically, but they were talking to other people about the sessions, which is always great. Okay, so this seems like a really good time to actually share some instructor feedback. And I'll start off with some of the feedback surveys. So at the end of each session in the series, I would administer a feedback form. And one of the participants shared the following. I like the format, having time to look at the assignments on our own and explore them in ways that make sense for our situations and then share out feels very productive. Another instructor said, "Thanks for doing such an amazing job of offering this information. I really appreciate the active learning and the low stakes environment." And then I had a question about like what was most helpful or meaningful about today's book club session. And one of the instructors said that it was the opportunity to play and then discuss our findings with each other. It's felt a little bit isolating to figure this out on our own, so I appreciate having a community in which to do this work. Thank you. And then I also had a summative feedback form at the very end of the series. And one of the questions that I included in there was before engaging in the book club series I, and then after engaging in the book club series I. And I got responses like these for the before. Before, I didn't know as much about AI as I do now, didn't know how I might use AI in the classroom, had a limited understanding of generative AI and its uses, was convinced this was not for me. I just wanted to see. So that one was a fun one to read. And then after engaging in the book club series, I am encouraged to continue exploring AI as it develops, have ideas to try several AI activities, have several ideas of ways to incorporate AI in my classes. And that last person said, "I can admit I was wrong. I learned something each time from my colleagues." And then there was an instructor who provided this testimonial. So it says, "I thoroughly enjoyed my experience with this book club. Because of Tolu's leadership, it was a no prep book club for us. Each week, she led our professional learning community, fostering discussions and giving us time to explore different ways to use AI in our teaching and professional lives. When the book club began, I did not understand AI and its uses in the classroom. Now I have a much better idea of how I want to incorporate it in my class." And one kind of unexpected outcome of this book club series was one of the instructors who participated in it was designing an online AI course for his students. And he was like, "Hey, I could actually use this as part of my course." So he did. He actually took the same OER book and used a similar structure for his online course to help his students build their own AI literacy. So I thought that was a really interesting and unexpected outcome. So one other thing that I wanted to quickly share here are some lessons learned. So one thing I would do differently if I were to do this again is I would make the kickoff meeting a little bit longer. As I mentioned, all of the sessions in this series were in 1 hour. I would probably make the kickoff meeting like 75 minutes to give us a little bit more time for the introductions and the exploration. Something else that I would probably possibly do different in the future is incorporating discipline-based breakout rooms. So one piece of feedback that I got was that it would be helpful if during that talk time that they could have disciplinary breakout rooms to talk with other colleagues in the same field. And so that's something that if you were considering doing this in your own institution, you might want to think about that. At least making optional breakout rooms so that if people want to do that, they can go there and chat with colleagues. Another thing that I did for this series is I did create a Microsoft Teams channel so that people could continue the discussions in between our meetings, like an asynchronous discussion space. To be honest, nobody used it. So I would probably either drop that aspect in the future or try to seed it with some questions and comments. But once again, I get that people are busy and it wasn't a big deal that that space wasn't used. And then the other piece of feedback was that instructors were interested in doing more book clubs, not necessarily whether it's AI or about other topics. They like the format itself. And so, as I mentioned earlier, there are other books in this series that you can check out, and I've linked to these in the resources that you'll receive at the very end. All right, so with that, we're going to go ahead and start wrapping up our time together. So you can now hopefully explain the structure of the AI No Prep Book Club, describe the benefits of utilizing a book club approach for AI professional learning, and plan how to implement the strategies used at your own institution. And so I have created a resource page full of all the things related to this session. So I'm going to share the link to the resource page in the chat, and I'll also briefly show you what it looks like. So on the resource page, you can download a copy of my slides. The Mentimeter poll results that we did at the very beginning are also linked here. The Padlet board is linked here. I've linked the sample Google Doc that you looked at earlier. And then the thing I really want to draw your attention to is this workshop Wakelet. So if you click on this link, it will take you to a Wakelet page where you can access all of my Tinker Time documents. So feel free to use and adapt these however works best for you. I've also linked all of the AI books that Yi and his colleagues have written, and I've also linked some of the resources that I use as the once a week resources that I shared with instructors there. So if that's helpful to you, please feel free to use that. And then at the bottom, there's a feedback form. So I invite your feedback about this session if you have a chance, either in these last couple of minutes or after the session. I welcome your feedback via the link down here. And with that, I just want to say thank you all so much for joining. I hope you're leaving with an idea of how you might implement either the series as a whole or certain aspects of it and adapt it to your own work. I also invite you to keep in touch with me, so you can find me on LinkedIn or Blue Sky or connect with me via my website. And you can also check out my book in case you're interested in learning more about workshop design and facilitation. So I'll paste all of that information in the chat. And with that, Tom, should I open it up for Q&A?
Yes, thank you so much, Tolu, and thank you so much, everyone.